Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me. If you're not here, where are ya? Where are you? Because you should be here. And if you're not new here and you've returned, despite this being the energy that is almost every video, I love and I appreciate you so freaking much. Okay, we have a lot to talk about today. I'm actually kind of like excited because I didn't think that I was gonna do this follow-up and then I just couldn't help myself, all right? Today is a follow-up to a case that I've covered. It is a case that I don't know, kind of took like the world over by storm. It's the Sherri Papini hoax and really, I think like brought people together in their like mutual infuriation over this woman. All right. So she has now come out with a new documentary, or not. She hasn't come out with it. Sorry. She participated in a new documentary with her versions of events. I don't think that it did what she thought, like in terms of like maybe helping her case, getting people out of that infuriating state when thinking about her, but you can be the judge of that, all right? So we're gonna do a little bit of a grounding riddle. We'll need it. And today's riddle is fun because it's another one that ties into today's sponsor, a favorite of mine and many of yours who love a good mystery and a mobile game, June's Journey. Okay, so the riddle is, I can show you what's false and hide what's true. Deceive the many, but reveal to a few. What am I? While you think about that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about June's Journey. If you've never played, you are truly missing out. It is a super fun hidden object game that totally sucks me in every single time I play. You play as June Parker, who is honestly, I don't know, she's just like an adorable protagonist. She doesn't have a badge or a crime lab or any insider info. She solves the cases purely through her wit, charm, and being way too nosy for her own good because relatable. She also kind of looks like Courtney Cox, which I couldn't love more being a Friends fanatic, so there's also that. In the game, June is investigating the death of her sister Claire and her brother-in-law Harry, and as we see in the trailer, the police think it was a murder schmoomicide, but June is not convinced, so she begins her own quest to uncover the truth. The storyline is absolutely fabulous. Every scene kind of feels like a little puzzle where you find the hidden objects to move forward. I absolutely love a hidden object game, always have. I think it's like the Where's Waldo or like I Spy era in all of us millennials maybe, but it's the perfect mix of relaxing and engaging, and I absolutely love the 1920s setting. So if you want to check it out, it's free to play on iOS, Android, and PC. And don't take my word for it. You know, you can scroll through the comments and you'll find other Sippindales who also love it. Thank you again to June's Journey for sponsoring today's video, and make sure you stick around to the end of the video for the answer to the riddle as always. All right, so Sherri Papini. Quick recap of the case for, you know, maybe anybody who hasn't heard of it before, didn't see the last video. Obviously, like the last video is gonna go like way more in depth, but just a little quick recap if you kind of want to just like stick around here. Sherri Papini is a stay-at-home mom, or was a stay-at-home mom in Redding, California, who vanished in 2016 while she was out on a jog. So her disappearance had launched this massive search effort. Her husband Keith, he would go on the news like almost daily, just like visibly devastated, publicly pleading for her safe return. The community all rallied to find her. There was even a balloon release organized for Thanksgiving afternoon of that year. Little did the community know, while they're out releasing these balloons on Thanksgiving, that morning, 22 days after Sherri had gone missing, she was found. A long-haul trucker had found her, pleading for help. She was bruised, chained, branded, and she said that she had been abducted by 2 Hispanic women. Now, I talk about this in the last video, but every time I hear the 911 call, I realize how immature I am at the caller calling her Sherri Panini. I'm pretty sure I said in the last video too, but we just need to review it here as well.
Emergency, what are you reporting?
Hi, I have an emergency. There's a lady on the side of the road needing help.
Do you know what's wrong with her?
She's saying that she got kicked out of her boyfriend's.
Okay, just be safe where you are. What is she asking for?
She's chained up, her victim's blurry, and needs an ambulance.
Do you see her chained up?
Yes. Her name is Sherri Panini.
Obviously, like everybody who had been following this from afar was like completely captivated and just like in awe that this woman had come back on Thanksgiving, like 22 days later. Behind the scenes, though, to investigators, things weren't really adding up. She did not want to talk to police. Her first interview was in the hospital, and she makes it very clear she wanted nothing to do with them or really trying to catch her abductors. She was kind of alluding to the fact that the abductors said that the police were like involved in her kidnapping, and that's why she didn't want to participate in anything. Now, looking back, the investigators who were on this, like reflecting, they said that there was actually a couple things that didn't sit right with them from the beginning. One of them obviously being that she didn't want to talk. But another thing that I found interesting was their reaction to her being branded. So on the back of her back, she had like Exodus burnt into her skin. They read the verse and it was very random. I guess it's like something about gathering straw, frogs going back to the Nile. And they were like, what was the purpose of this? Like looking through everything, it just didn't really make sense. Now, we go through a lot of the interview footage in the last video that I did. So if you want to see that and kind of like see things unraveling in real time, check that out. Here is like a quick recap though.
I feel like sometimes it's easier with my eyes closed.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can do anything you want.
I don't know. There's certain things that are very difficult to explain. There's certain things that for me it's a feeling. It's not facts. Okay. So if there's something that's not a fact, if there's something that I was feeling, because I don't speak Spanish, but there was a lot of body language, and I can understand body language. Okay. So there's things for me that I feel went a certain way. Are those things that you want, or are those things you want me to hold back because they're not facts?
You tell me anything you want.
I did my usual routine, fed the chickens, cleaned the house, cleaned everything. Just the usual. Text message my husband to come home for lunch, which, looking back is quite embarrassing. He's like, thanks for, that last text message. Honey, will you please come home to have sex with your wife for lunch?
One thing I think really helped with that, like, speculative angle, even though I'm sure like all investigators are like trained to think that way, but from the get-go, there was like two agencies on this. There was like the Redding team of authorities that were on this, and then there was also the FBI, because Keith from the get-go, as soon as he found out Sherri was missing, like had been adamant that he wanted the FBI involved to help find her as well. And they thought from the get-go like things really already, like from day one, were suspicious. They thought that the way her hair was coiled in her headphones and placed like on top of her phone by the mailbox where like Keith had gone walking looking for her on the like Find My iPhone, and he finds her phone, and then everything kind of just like seems like it was like neatly placed there. Also, prior to her being found, investigators had accessed like her messages and saw on her phone that there were males that she was communicating with, specifically some of her exes, and they were listed under like female names. So making it look like, obviously if Keith were to look at her phone, it's like, oh, I'm just talking to Kathy or whoever. And in these messages to these ex-boyfriends of hers, she's portraying that her marriage is very unhealthy and dangerous. I guess Keith had caught her messaging men earlier in the marriage and had made a post-nup agreement after that saying that, I'm going to give you another chance to try to work on this marriage, but if you step out again, you get nothing. So this is already in the back of like everybody's mind from like day one of her missing. Now we're going to move to day one of her being found. Sherri had always been adamant that it was two women that had kidnapped her. There was never any males involved. There was only ever, I think, the insinuation that she was possibly going to be like shipped to another location and someone was going to like purchase her, and that could have been a male, but it was always two Hispanic women. Well, imagine the investigator's surprise when DNA results come back from the clothes that she was wearing when she was returned home, and there was male DNA on her underwear that did not match her husband Keith. It also didn't match anybody that was already in the database, so investigators turned to the familial DNA tracing, which we are seeing so much more of these days, and it took 4 years. 4 years, but they were finally able to match it to a man named James Reyes, who happened to be an ex-boyfriend of Sherri's. And all of this time, in those 4 years that it took them to link him to that DNA, she's still with Keith, like living her life. She was also collecting like stimulus checks for the trauma that she had endured. So investigators go to James first. They interview him for a couple hours, and it takes about an hour for him to finally admit that he was with Sherri during those 22 days, and it was him that picked her up. Initially, he was just trying to say, like, yes, she was an ex of mine. We haven't seen each other for, like, ever. Oh, my God, like, it's been, like, years and years and years and years since we've ever been intimate. Like, I don't know what to say. And then as he's, like, feeling the pressure of the investigators getting very close to figuring out that Sherri was behind this like kidnapping, he cracks and he's like, yeah, she was with me for those 22 days. I'm the one who picked her up. He says they had been talking, reconnecting, and the whole plan was for him to help her get out of a bad situation at home and stay with him. He denied taking her against her will, and he even said that she asked him to help make bruises on her to make it look like she had gone through, this horrible traumatic ordeal within these 22 days, and that she was the one who asked him to brand her. And he reluctantly said yes, because like she was so adamant on this being what she wanted him to do.
She was trying to get away from her husband, and I don't know their deal. It was it. I went and got her.
So it's 3 days after they interview James when Sherri is re-interviewed at the police station, and she is confronted with everything that they knew. The interrogation footage of them dropping the bomb that they're like, it was James. It's so epic. Definitely a must-see in total, but we'll put a little clip here for you.
And we've been talking about that a lot because so many memories are so faded now. Details and things like that. We did the best that we could to take notes on it and all that, but a lot of it's really hard. I don't think so.
And when you're ready, I'll show you.
Nothing's really like...
There's nothing in there that says, oh yeah, that's her.
No.
Okay.
I don't know. This is really hard. I don't know.
So the DNA came back to James Reyes.
The DNA that was on you belongs to James Reyes. If that's not what happened, what did happen, Sherri?
No, she doesn't ever like fully just cave and admit it. Ultimately, though, she is arrested for lying to federal agents and also mail fraud. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 months in prison and served 10 months. So now we're all caught up, and Sherri is back with her side of the story. Now, like I said, I wasn't wanting to watch because there's nothing that I really can't stand more than kind of like already going in with a bias and just thinking like, a manipulator is thinking that they're like good enough of a liar to change the narrative and make themselves look better and like change everybody's mind. But I was already committed with, already making the first video. So do it for the plot, right? And I don't know how I feel coming out of this, okay? And we'll get through why. But first impression of Sherri is like I said, I don't think that she came across how she wanted to. I do find the vibe a little bit overly confident. I have arrogant written down here in my notes, but I don't know if it's full arrogant. It's like overly confident. She's like overboard hysterical, laughing sometimes, saying things like, I'm gonna be a little bit ridiculous because this whole thing is like a little bit ridiculous. Like kind of like that, Now she claims the media version of her is all wrong, that, she's been misunderstood this whole time and is finally ready to share her story. Her mom also appears in the doc. And she's a little bit quirky energy also, so maybe like it kind of explains like Sherri's behavior. I don't know. Anyways, let's dig into what she reveals. Okay, Sherri claims she lied, but she didn't lie about everything, just about who took her. She is now admitting that she was not kidnapped by 2 Hispanic women and that it was only James Reyes, but she didn't reveal his identity because she feared him. And she also didn't want Keith to know that them starting their communication, so Sherri and James's communication, that all started basically like having an emotional affair. Big theme of the documentary is not only blaming James, but also Keith. She says that Keith emotionally abused her, isolated her, controlled all the money, and this pressure of being this like perfect family and perfect wife drove her to reconnect with James. Sherri alleged that after Keith had found out that she, had like strayed from the marriage, Keith said in that post-nup, not only would she not get anything if she cheated, but she says that he also told her if she did anything to displease him, she would get nothing and, quote, end up living under a bridge. So in 2016, she was laid off from her job at AT&T, and she says Keith at this point was the one with the job. And so he was allowed to kind of like make those decisions of her finances and use that as control over her. She said her social circle started shrinking. He made a rule that she wasn't allowed to speak to him at night. He just wanted to like come home, eat dinner, and then like watch TV and not be spoken to. It was during this time she alleged that James reached out to her because he was letting her know about a death in his family. And from there, they just continued to text and talk on the phone. And she felt heard by James. And from there, it just progressed to them getting burner phones to communicate. Now, the FBI say and believe that the burner phones were to plan this kidnapping hoax, but Sherri says, no, this was to conceal the affair. Now, in this documentary, Sherri also gives some inside scoop about what was going on for her behind the scenes after the arrest, and like everything kind of came out. Because remember, for like 4 years before, the DNA was linked to James, she and Keith were still living together. She's like, collecting the checks, going through like therapy and all this stuff. But after the arrest, she says that she was released on bail 5 days after being arrested, and that by the time she got home, Keith had all of her things in garbage bags and didn't want to see her. So she went to live with Keith's sister, and I will say that Keith's sister seems like a very kind-hearted, empathetic person. Like, I definitely felt for her in the documentary. She even said, like, yeah, I do believe that Sherri has lied, but she also sees someone in Sherri that like needed to be loved at that time and listened to and protected, especially like right after like getting released and being released on bail, knowing that you're going to have like a court date. She also says, the Keith's sister, that she didn't grow up particularly close to Keith and still isn't. So at the time of her being on bail, Sherri and Keith were still sharing custody of the kids. And then on April 13th, 2022, 6 weeks after her arrest, she was arraigned. And Sherri basically said that she was forced to sign a plea agreement that she did not agree with. She admitted that, yes, she had lied about the 2 Hispanic women being involved, but that was the only thing that she lied about, and was like wanting that to be like clear in this plea agreement. Everything she said like about the injuries was true, the room that James kept her in, and she says that she did not want to sign this plea agreement saying otherwise, but was told that if she didn't agree to this, more charges were going to be tacked on and she would be put away in prison for years. So she basically just agreed to saying this was all a hoax that I participated in. My understanding is basically the lawyers had gone back and forth, and she did admit to participating in the kidnapping, but did not sign that she inflicted injuries on herself. And James admitted that she persuaded him to do that. So like that does make sense. Now, her therapist also appears in the documentary, which I felt was kind of interesting. And he diagnosed her with self-defeating personality disorder and believes that she was abducted by James. He believes her story. He says that he doesn't think that she orchestrated this hoax and that she was a victim of childhood SA. And from that moment, key moment of trauma in her life, everything just like kind of spiraled and like led up to this moment for her desire to be loved and validated by someone, specifically for Sherri, it's men. Sherri's parents also on the doc admitted that yes, there was SA trauma in her life. That no one's really clear on like the exact age, but said it was like somewhere around the early double digits. And I believe her father actually even walked in on it happening, and it was a very understandably traumatic situation. Obviously had a detrimental effect on her, and no one should ever experience that, especially a child. I do agree with the therapist that, childhood essay in general, but, childhood essay is very impactful, especially in those formative years. It can lead to a lot of disassociation, pleasing others, personality disorder. And so the therapist alleges that with this type of disorder, if what she's saying is true about Keith not giving her the attention that she wanted, no matter how hard she was working towards like pleasing him and being like the perfect wife that he wanted, that led her to start looking for that validation elsewhere. The way the therapist sees it is that, communicating with James was kind of this like temporary fulfillment for her needs. And that once that was like recharged, that would kind of allow her to go back to being what Keith needed for her. And then he says like what happened with James taking it the wrong way, that was out of Sherri's control. So her therapist very much believes that she was abducted and not a willing participant in planning the abduction and abuse that she suffered for over 20 days that she was with James. And he said that once she was finally released, she just kind of like let that lie continue because she just wanted everything that happened to go away out of fear of what she had experienced, but then also preservation for her marriage and her family. Again, the documentary heavily pushes like this narrative that Keith was the villain and James was an absolute monster for taking advantage of Sherri. Another big push is that they believe that Keith kind of never was ever intent on finding out like real answers of the possibility that some of what or most of what Sherri was saying was actually true, because once there was the element of the ex-boyfriend being in there, he was, like the husband scorn, and all he was set out to do was just find out, like catch her in a lie, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's really interesting that she's kind of like used that for sympathy in the documentary, because it's kind of reminding me of what's going on with Elizabeth Teckenbrock right now. It's like the blaming of the man, giving excuses to why you've lied and deceived so many people, and like they're the bad person for like wanting to expose your lie. I don't know. If you don't know, also, Chelsea and I are producing a podcast called Elizabeth. The last episode will be the next episode. It was going to be the last episode of the series, but it'll be the last episode of the season because holy cannoli, you guys have no idea what's been happening behind the scenes, especially in this past like week. Whew. Anyways, but yeah, I've noticed like a lot of similarities. Maybe that's just because I've been working like so much on the Elizabeth Teckenbrock stuff that when I saw Sherri, I was like, whoa, are you girls the same? And I mentioned it in the podcast series, but like when you have a gut feeling that you're being lied to and deceived, like Elizabeth Teckenbrock's ex-husband and like Keith, like there's, especially if it's somebody that you love, it takes everything in you. Like it just like overcomes your like whole life and personality of wanting to know the truth, right? And it seems like if it's men that have this desire, it's like automatically assumed and pushed that they're abusive and manipulative, like for asking questions and looking deeper. So how do we get to the whole kidnapping thing with, like according to Sherri? So she alleges when her and James initially started communicating, she liked the comfort of like having the attention, but only always wanted it to be emotional, like from afar. She said over time, though, like that emotional connection got even more intense on his part, it sounds like, where he wanted to like come out and see her. He would say things like he was just gonna like come and drive out and visit her, and then when she would push back, it got to him wanting to like come from Costa Mesa to Redding to see her, knew where she lived, he said, and that he even threatened to tell Keith, which is what she absolutely did not want to happen. She said she tried to kind of like gently break things off several times, but then decided to meet with him in person to at least like give him that, since he was like trying to like push seeing each other in person, just kind of like get that out of his system. And at that time, just be like, okay, glad we saw each other. Like, I can't continue doing this anymore. So she says that they did agree to meet up. They texted the morning of, her kidnapping, her alleged kidnapping. And she told James that she was just going to go out for a run and then let him know when she was done. And then from there, they could pick a meeting spot. Sherri says she started her run. And when she got to like the end of where their pavement was and the mailboxes, she saw a vehicle pull up and then back up. And that's when she realized it was James. She said at this point, her cell phone fell And when she went to go reach it, she doesn't remember anything after. Now, during the documentary, the interviewer stops her, and I was so glad because I was like, whoa, I remember this story going differently. And you can hear like the producer behind going like, hey, wait a second. So after you were returned home, there is a transcript of you speaking to Keith in the hospital, like right after, and you tell him like you deliberately left your phone behind so that he could see like your hair and your phone left behind and your earbuds, knowing that something had happened to you. And then she's like, oh, yeah, I knew in captivity that they found my phone. James told me they found the phone, so I already knew that. And the interview's like, yeah, I'm just not understanding though. If you already knew that the phone was found, like the narrative with Keith actually makes more sense of this like staging as opposed to you like, what does that have anything to do with you changing it now? Like that you reach down for it and all of a sudden you don't remember anything. Like now things aren't adding up. She talks in circles. It's something I would suggest watching. I don't think we'll be able to put any clips because we'll probably get a copyright strike, but there's a couple times that she's like caught in certain things. And like, even though we're going to talk about it on here, it's totally worth like checking it out and seeing her reaction yourself. But, being like called out, she's like, oh yeah, it's just, like things had just like, what's the word? Like just got like so, and the interviewer's like embellished. And she's like, yeah, there was like a lot of like embellishment around like everything. What? Sherri, what? So she says like what she told Keith at the hospital, like right after, that was a lie, that she never like pulled her hair out and left it behind for him to find, and that the real story is that like it fell, she bent down to get it, doesn't remember anything after, and like that's the truth. But the original story like aligns with the evidence. You know what I'm saying? Like this is where I find it hard, because you don't want to like deter somebody from telling their truth. If it happened the way that Sherri says it happened, this would be a very horrible, traumatic situation. The evidence doesn't really match what she's saying. Now, one thing that is consistent with both stories is that she has no memory of like getting into the car. No memory of how what got in there, what the car was, nothing. She says she has tried EMDR, she's tried hypnosis therapy, and there's no memory of her getting in the car, which also can be a response to very traumatic situations like holes in the memory. She even did like this reenactment for the documentary to try and remember and couldn't, and her therapist weighed in on that and said like, okay, well this, like just proves the fact that she's learned a lot, like she's not just trying to please everybody like this documentary crew or like potentially all of these viewers and make up an abduction. There we go, Sherrilyn. Just to please people, which she would do in the past. So this shows that she's not lying. And I think you could take that, like both ways. It could be like, yeah, she doesn't want to, but also knowing that she's being heavily scrutinized. So even if she were to say like, oh, I kind of remember the vehicle, like that would be, what's the word I'm looking for? Debunked very quickly. So from her getting into the vehicle, not knowing how she got into the vehicle, she said she was going in and out of consciousness. The next thing that she remembered, James is trying to get her out of the vehicle. She said it was dark outside. He had like one arm under her helping her. And then she just remembers thinking like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be anymore. She alleged that at this time, James asked her to kiss him and she refused. And the next thing she knew, she woke up in a room with the windows boarded and she was undressed. She says at one point she did try to pull one of the boards off in this room, and that James came in and found her trying to do this and hit her in the face. And she said that was like the first bruise that she got when she was like knocked out from him doing this. And when she woke up with a chain around her waist, and that chain was locked with a padlock, and it was like attached to a cable that was attached to a pole in the closet. Now, Sherri says that she did ask James, like, what is this all for? Like, why am I chained up? Why am I here? And allegedly James told her, well, you have kept saying you wanted me to help you, and this is how I'm helping you, because you're trying to escape and go back to a bad situation, but I'm going to keep you here until you realize, like you're not supposed to be with Keith anymore, and ultimately you're going to agree that this is like the safer option. Now, in James's interview, he does say that, yes, there were boards that were in the bedroom. There's a lot of things that are in there that, like Sherri describes, that, yes, they were in that room. And he says that she had asked him to do this because she just wanted it to be dark, wanted to be alone, wanted to be isolated. Again, like he said that she would ask like very concerning, alarming things. And it was kind of just like he would push back and like she would like push even further. And it was like, okay, I'm not going to ask any questions. Like clearly there's something going on here. James said that she hardly ate while she was there, and that is something that was like very clear on camera, and even to like her loved ones when they first saw her, she was so tiny and frail. And Sherri says that the reason why she wouldn't eat was there was a time that James very early on brought her food, and she said that she ate it and believed there were drugs in it because she had never done drugs before. She never really like drank any time before in her life, doesn't even really drink coffee, and she was like completely out of it. So she assumed that he was drugging her food. So that's why she was refusing food. She alleges like just absolutely horrible things happening to her in this house at the hands of James Reyes. She said that there were times that she would wake up and parts of her body would be sore. She didn't even remember what had happened or couldn't even explain a lot of her injuries. She said that he would tell her that she could, come out of the room and join him in other parts of the house when she earned it. So she also could only use the bathroom when she earned that, or eat when she earned it. And she said earning it meant participating in acts that he would, sexually, that he would want her to do, and to not like scream or like try to escape. She also said that part of the participating and like earning was the sexual acts, including, pain being inflicted on her. So a lot of, she's claiming those injuries, that was like part of like what James wanted. There's a very powerful, intense moment in the documentary where she said she just kind of went along with things, and that the only focus like of her, like, because she'd have to detach, and the only thing that she was like attaching to what was happening was from keeping him from like ejaculating inside of her, because she was like, I don't want to get pregnant by this man. And then follows up like looking at the camera saying, is that consent? That I'm agreeing to it to save myself, preserve myself, my life, get back to my family. And that, like she's disassociating, and the only thing that she's like present for is like making sure that like she doesn't get pregnant. So basically she's adamant. She did not inflict the injuries herself. She says she did not ask James to inflict these injuries on her either, which contradicts James's 2019 confession to investigators when they came to speak to him, where, he claimed that it was Sherri that asked him to help her and even brand her and also help her to disappear. It wasn't like he's saying that he didn't just like go up there to like go talk to her and this is what had happened and then decided to kidnap her. He's saying that this was all a part of the plan. Now, what I found interesting was her talking about the branding, right? Everybody has questions about this, like the Exodus branding on her back. And James, obviously said that this is something that she asked him to do. He absolutely did not understand like why, but at this point, again, was not asking questions. And Sherri says that this was James's idea, and that like this was like a very like psychological, like evil move that James knew would destroy her. Now, she said that she used to like use those like wood burning, engraving, like crafting tools, and do them with like as a hobby with her dad. They would like craft like little coasters at Christmas and stuff and use those tools to like burn and engrave them. And she had told James this before, and that's why he chose to do this to her, so that like he could ruin that like memory and hobby for her forever. I did find it a little interesting. Again, we can never kind of like put ourselves in shoes of like victims, like and their trauma and like what you're gonna do after. I get that. This is what Sherri's alleging. It's just something that a perspective that I saw and like questions that I had from afar were that she still has that scar despite her having like other tattoos on her back. And I'd be like, I'd understand if you're just like, I just don't ever want to get tattooed, so I never thought about like covering it up. But oftentimes, like you see, trauma victims use tattooing as you know, like kind of like a form of like healing and releasing, whether that's like a word or something. But oftentimes if there's like a scar and tied to like a really bad memory, they'll cover it up. I actually have like a scar on my arm that leads to a horrible, horrible memory. And it's on the arm that like I haven't wanted to like commit to like a sleeve yet. It's like, it's unfortunately on the opposite arm of where I have the sleeve, and I go back and forth. So maybe that's it, right? It's like I already have tattoos and I also haven't done the same, but I'm also like, okay, what is like a really like prominent visible space, and I don't know what I'm doing with my life. So anyways, I can't judge, but it was something that I saw where I was like, girl, you already have back tattoos. Like why wouldn't we just like kind of like move that flower over to, you know what I mean? Anyways, okay. And then the next big question and like bombshell I found, or I felt, was the reasoning behind why Sherri said it was 2 Hispanic women that had done this to her. Sherri says the reason that she said that was because she was trying to leave breadcrumbs to investigators about who was involved without revealing the identity. So she was trying to lead investigators to James without outright saying it was James, and said that she was trying to describe James's mother. Okay, so she's implying that the description of the older woman that she gave looked like James's mother. So just remember that, okay? So also during this documentary, she takes a lie detector test. It was conducted by a man named Brett Barlett. He's a polygraph expert and retired police officer. He's got 20 years of experience in law enforcement. And he says in the documentary, you know, like he was signing on with, you know, like following like strict code and guidelines, industry standard. He's not going to be biased for the documentary. Again, I feel like you guys have to watch it for yourself and just kind of like see mannerisms and stuff like that. But who am I? Who am I to judge? So the first set of questions were, at any time from November 22nd to November 24th, like when she was kidnapped, did James tell you you were free to leave? She answered no to the polygrapher, and he said he believed her. He believed that that was true. I thought the questions were kind of interesting, right? Because it's like, at any time did he say like you were free to leave? It's like, what? Well, why would he say that? You know, like if it was planned, why would he be like, you know, you can leave? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense. So the questions were odd. So of course she would say no and then be like, yeah, you're telling the truth. Then the next question was, during that same time, did she feel she could leave without any fear of violence? She said no. He felt she was being truthful. Again, this is kind of like a question that's not like specifically for like maybe that individual or that situation. It could be like her coming home and the truth being exposed and like something bad happening to her, like the police, or you know what I mean? Like, I found them interesting. I would have asked different ones. Okay, but I'm not a polygraph expert. And then the last question in this set of questioning was, did you ask James Reyes to brand you? She said no. And the polygrapher, he believed her. He believed that James did this on his own. So then there was like a second set of questions that he had questions about after, like with her answers. He asked if she had planned to leave with James. So if this was planned, she said no. And the response showed otherwise. I don't think it was like a straight up no, but it was like inconclusive. Sherri's explanation was because like she technically did make a plan with him to like get together, and potentially earlier on in their conversation was like move down there with him, and then obviously that day to meet up with him to keep him from telling Keith. And then the other ones that were all unresolved were, did you arrange for James to pick you up while you were out for your run on November 2nd? Because remember, she said that she was planning to go for a run. There was never the plan for him to come then. So that was inconclusive. Do you remember getting into James's car? That was inconclusive. And did you enter James's vehicle voluntarily? That was inconclusive. So once again, there's like this moment when all of this comes out that the production team asks her, like after taking this polygraph, that like, okay, well now the narrative is changing once again. Like, so what is the truth here? They say, you told the polygrapher that you had led James on, but you told us otherwise. You know, like you said that you had never consented to going anywhere with him or leading him to believe that there was like a future. Again, she's caught in this lie, and she seems very trained on how to talk her way out of lies in general. And she explains like what she meant exactly. And she goes on to explain again, like, okay, well, this is actually what I meant, and now like the new details fit this new narrative. She says that there was never a plan for kidnapping, but there was a discussion where she said she would go down to Costa Mesa. So now, throughout this documentary, it's already changed by the end. And then even though she had told the team prior that there was like, she was aware that he was like going to come down, and she had made a plan for him to come down, and she was going to break it off. And it was going to be the day that she was allegedly kidnapped, because she had texted him to say like, I'm going to go for a run and then we're going to make plans to like meet up after. Now she's saying like, there was never a clear plan to go on November 2nd, 2016. Like that, there wasn't a date set. So like within the same documentary, we don't know what to believe anymore. Furthermore, she doubles down with, even if I did agree to go on the 2nd, when I wanted to go home, he should have allowed me to go. Yes. But again, this is kind of like fitting it's like adjusting pieces to like make the puzzle fit, but she's constantly like changing what the puzzle is. So I think this is what happens, obviously, when people are caught in lies. And at the end of the day, we know that she was allowed to leave. She didn't escape James's house in the condition that she was allowed to leave. And the way she tells, this whole like escape story is that James obviously allowed her to leave, but it was like during a dinner where he had allowed her off the chain, where they had a discussion about the fact that the media was starting to like really blow up this story, and everybody was out there looking for Sherri. And Sherri said to James, Keith he's never gonna give up. He's never gonna stop looking for me. Like, so you might as well let me go. She said that James initially was reluctant. He said, too much has happened at this point. I don't want to let you go. You're just going to keep you here until you figure out you're supposed to be with me. But she was ultimately able to convince him that I'll take the fall for this. And you won't even be mentioned. I'll figure something out and I'll take all the blame. So that's how she said the whole like kidnapping story started, was to just like protect James, since like that was basically like how she was let go. And then she was scared that if she told the truth like from the get-go, it would like cause him to like retaliate, and she feared for like her family and her life. I think it's also important to know that before that final interview that Sherri did with law enforcement, where they confronted her with, like all the evidence that they had and, the DNA like leading back to James also took a polygraph test. And according to the FBI, he passed every question. He was asked if Sherri was the one that asked him to pick her up. He said yes. They said that was the truth. He was also asked if it was Sherri that asked him to brand her, and he said yes, and that was true. Like I said earlier, he also said that Sherri would stay in that room voluntarily. She was not locked up for days. She was free to leave, but she just chose to like stay there in the dark. And he worked long hours most of the time, so he didn't even really know like what she was up to and doing during the day. I also think it's important to kind of like take his interview into consideration, and the timing specifically, because he was pretty much interviewed like on the fly when like he finally admitted to like participating in this, what he said was a hoax kidnapping. So like out of nowhere, all of a sudden he's like blowing her story out of the water and going into this polygraph and passing it. She took a polygraph, like this is years and years and years later, of telling lies that fit the narrative and like fill in the holes as she's questioned. So just like personally, and hasn't, my opinion is nothing, but just me personally, what I was grasping from or like seeing with that and like putting into account was like, she's got like an excuse and reasoning for why she might be like inconclusive. She's also very, very good at lying. Like polygraphs aren't like, there's a reason why they're not used in like actual trials and stuff like that, because they're not always reliable, right? But if you're already like a good liar, the chances of you being able to be somebody who could like pass or even like get to the point of it being like a little like questionable, like so you're just in that inconclusive like gray area, like it's even stronger because you tell a lie so much that you start to believe it, especially like after years and years of her telling like the same thing. And then there's also the element of her like having the like half truths, right? So not only like the lie that she's used to, but like you're also sprinkling in a little bit of the half truth. So that like also is kind of murky when it comes to polygraphs in general. I guess my thoughts on this, the easiest way that I think we would know whether or not she's like telling the truth is if it wasn't true, like why hasn't James sued for defamation? These claims are like, they're monstrous, right? Like she's saying that she participated in no way whatsoever, never gave consent for anything, like any abuse, kidnapping, it would be rape that she endured. And so if that is not true, you'd think that like he would sue for defamation. I don't know. Maybe he's like, you know what? Nobody believes her anyways. So like to go through all of that like stress and even testifying. I don't know. All I know is he absolutely denies kidnapping and sexually abusing Sherri. He maintains that like any harm inflicted on her like at his hand was done with her direction. He also hasn't been charged with any crime or like connection to Sherri's disappearance. It's participating like within the hoax, and he was not charged with anything. Another thing, because I want to be fair here, that I will say was listening to the audio of that interview with James with detectives, like the first one where they like, hey buddy, we know, and he lied for like the first like hour of it. They are reassuring him that, like if it was her that asked him to like pick her up, then it's not kidnapping. If she asked him to like bring her to his house and inflict bruises on her while she was there, that's not assault because she's asking for it. And so I feel like, yeah, listening back to it, the questions, they're pretty leading, I would say. But then I have to go back to probably the biggest bomb that was dropped for me personally in the documentary. And it was when production, it was like at the end, they confronted Sherri by saying, so you told us earlier that the reason why you came up with the 2 Hispanic women storyline is because you wanted to lead, like the sketch artist to sketch James's mother, who she, describes as a Hispanic woman, and then that would lead the breadcrumbs to James. So the producer's like going through like, like reminding her, bringing her to those breadcrumbs with like what Sherri had already said. And Sherri's like nodding, like saying yes. And they're like, okay, well, we hired a private investigator to find James's mother, and she's not Hispanic. And they like give her a minute and her face like just drops. And they're like, she's Irish. And at the time I was like, did she ever see her? Where is this coming from? And she literally, because in my mind, I'm like, those are like 2 of the most opposite descriptions that you could probably get, right? And so she sits there and she's like, well, this really didn't have anything to do with his mother. I've met her twice. It was more about getting them to James. I was like, you met her? Because James does look like he has darker features for sure. I wouldn't say like doing, I don't know, like maybe I would have even like said more like the sketch of like making James look feminine maybe. I don't know. I have no idea what this woman was thinking. Even from the get-go of putting all of this on 2 like innocent Hispanic women that she's just like created in her head. But then after this, knowing that piece is under so much scrutiny, to be like, oh, it was his mom, people are going to look into this. So of course they're going to be like, oh, okay, like, what does she look like? What's her heritage? What does she look like? Is that like, could that make all of the sense in the world? They're like, she's Irish. And then she goes on to admit like, she met her twice and like would know that, and that had like Irish features. So to say then that biggest piece where she's saying, I'm trying to lead it to James, and then she's like, oh, like, well, it had nothing to do with her. Like it was about getting to James. Then she further doubles down and goes, and quite frankly, I don't give a F if she's Hispanic or not. It's about James, not her. Sherri, this is where we have a hard time. You get us? It's almost like, okay, like, yeah, all right, that could be. And then it's like, why? You're not making sense, Sherri. She is asked pretty much at the end, like, what do you think, like, how can your story be corroborated since you and James are telling like 2 different stories? And she says her only way of getting justice is that her abuser, who in her, like when she's saying that is alleging that it's James, outright comes forward and admits to his crimes, which she says is unlikely. Now, there was a private investigator hired by the production company to go down to Arizona to talk to James. You hear a clip of him like going up to the door, James answering. He's very dismissive. He said, he doesn't want to be involved. He has nothing to say. The PI mentions like, well, like she's alleging that you abducted her, just so you know. And he said, yeah, I'm not surprised, and I'm going to have to contact a lawyer to deal with it. And that's all that I'm going to say. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens, because like with all of this coming out, I can only imagine like there's going to be way more people knocking on that door with questions. And if he is innocent and the story is what he is told, like he can sue for defamation. Now, Sherri supporters, like her parents who were in there, and then also like Keith's sister, were asked, what they believe, like what version. They've heard all of the version of events, like what do they believe? Sherri's dad is actually like, well, you'd have to ask Sherri. And her mom is like, well, I think Sherri was very unhappy in her marriage and she needed to get out of it, and she didn't go about it the way, the right way. She just did what she thought was best, and says, I don't think it was a kidnapping. Her mom says that in the interview. And then Keith's sister was also asked the same question, and she says she does believe Sherri, that she was kidnapped by James. But then she follows up with, even if you want to look into it, like regardless, something fishy is going on. Like even if you're not going to want to like believe her side of events of like orchestrating this and asking to, like be drugged and starved and burned and abused. She's like, if she did ask all of this and that's the truth, what kind of person participates and goes along with it? Which, yeah, I agree. It's a great question. As of today, Sherri's out. She's telling her story. She says her kids have been stolen from her. Keith had filed for 100% custody prior to her going to prison. And because she was going to be going to prison, it was granted. Keith has also gone on to like do a couple like documentaries and interviews and projects like himself. And in the most recent one, he alleges that some pretty, like heavy accusations. He said that pretty much Sherri, he believed like would kind of like drug the kids. Maybe it was like I don't know if he was trying to like push like a Munchausen by proxy situation. He said in this one documentary that Sherri would soak rags in alcohol and put them in plastic bags and tie it around the kids' necks, and they would wear this like if they were sick or congested. He alleges that she did it to make them sick so she could take them to the doctor for attention. I personally don't think that like fits her MO. The attention that she seeks is like not on behalf of like her family or kids. It's like herself, like she's the victim. So yeah, I don't know what Keith was, I don't know. Again, I wasn't there, but it just didn't sound like Sherri, like hate her or not. It just like she wasn't really showing like a lot of behavior like that. I don't know, I guess like in her history and everything that's kind of like been dug up. She says that the story behind that is that the kids were very sensitive to Vicks. Like if they put Vicks on, it would like break them out. So anytime that they were sick, she would put like essential oils like on a cloth and put that like in a bag and then put that like on their necks, like for them to breathe and try to help with that. So she did file a cease and desist against like that allegation, which yeah, okay. I believe that one, I think. I don't know. I mean, again, I wasn't there. My opinion is irrelevant, but I just don't feel like it fits their MO. It's like Sherri's done a lot. I obviously lied a lot. That one, I don't know if Keith just got a little bit too like kind of reaching, trying to take something that yes, she did do and make it something it wasn't maybe. And like I mentioned, after she was, like free from James's house, in that 4 years that they were trying to figure out whose DNA it was, she's at home. And I said that she was like collecting like the disability funds. And she says that the whole story behind that is that Keith continued to go on controlling all of the money. So prior to her kidnapping, she wasn't working. So he already had all of the money. And then with this, when she came home and she was getting, disability funds, Keith continued to control the money. Like she wasn't collecting that herself. She said and did prove like her bank transfers, like the money would come in and then it would automatically go into Keith's account. And he was asked for a statement and he said like he denies like any abuse, financial, physical, emotionally. But then he also says that when it came to the money, this was reimbursement for expenses that they shared. So he wasn't like controlling the money from her. That was like her contribution to like their shared like household expenses. And that's pretty much where the documentary ends. Like for me, it felt like very gray personally. Again, this is just my opinion. I don't believe the new version of events. And that's sad because if it's true, it's like this is kind of what's the old like, not wives' tale, frick, like fable, like Aesop's fable, the boy who cried wolf, right? Like if you lie so many times, like when you're actually really, really like screaming and needing somebody to help you and listen to you and believe you, the lies, like they kind of like just veto the truth. So that's where I struggle. There's also been like a lot of people who've spoke out like from her past after like all of this coming out, say, like exes and even like friends that she went to school with being like, she's kind of always been this way. Like she's always embellished things. She's always lied. She's even gone missing several times in her past. Actually, I don't know if there's any survivors, Sippindales out there. Me and Big are big Survivor fans. And so on this latest season of Survivor, there was a guy on there named Shaheen, and he dated her. He had been interviewed before, and he's like, so that was like wild when I was like, Shaheen? What do you have to do with Sherri Papini? Sherri Panini?
Her name is Sherri Panini?
And his story was like wild. So he said like she lied all the time. He really liked surfing, and she would be like walk around with like a surfboard and stuff like that. And then sometimes when he'd like ask to go surfing with her, she'd be like, oh, like my surfboard is getting like fixed right now and I can only use mine. Like he never saw her surf at all. Also something really concerning though, them when they were like dating, and I feel like that's hard to like even say because I feel like he was being groomed. He was 15 years old and she was 20. The age gap there, especially like for a woman like 20, what the hell does a 20-year-old woman have anything to do with a 15-year-old? I mean, vice versa too, like same with the male. But like what, like when it's a woman like who's usually doing that, it frustrates me and like makes me so infuriated how young male victims don't get like the same like justice and attention, because that is so freaking sick. Also, a lot of people from her past said that, like with her saying that Keith was abusive, she told multiple people that, not just James, but she also would say that about every relationship that she was in. So this is kind of like going, like back to when you're lying about like everything and not even just this situation. Because again, for that, I could feel like, okay, it just like took on a life of its own. You were trying to like, preserve your marriage, be in fight or flight. You already knew like your husband probably wouldn't understand how this like got out of control. But the fact that this has like already happened several times in her life, just like not to this degree because like the media didn't pick it up the way that this did, that's what kind of just, kind of squashes her credibility. But that is my opinion. I really would love to know what you guys think. Do you believe that, like officially right now, like as of the 2025, if you're watching in the future, that's when she's come out with this? Like, is she finally telling the truth? I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts though. And that's where I'm going to leave you today. I love you guys all. I'm already going to miss you like so much already. I'm like, why? I don't want to turn off the camera. I missed you guys. I'll see you in the next video though. I will miss you terribly until then. The answer to today's riddle is, I can show what's false and hide what's true, deceive the many, but reveal to a few. What am I? And the answer is Clue. Thank you again to June's Journey for sponsoring today's video. Like I said, if you guys want to check them out, it is free to play on iOS, Android, and PC. Go find them. Clues, baby. Thank you again, June's Journey. Thank you guys for always being here. I love you so much. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon.